Hello, LeisureMartians. Here is the second part of me reacting to Patrick H. Williams' video RRR is the biggest blockbuster you have never heard of. Let's go.
In the next chapter, we meet Ram, who is working as a policeman for the British Crown, and he is introduced fighting 200 men at the same time.
Not
all by
200,
himself.
dude.
Then
It's
in the next chapter,
at least
we're
1,000
introduced to
men.
Beam, wearing a loincloth in the forest, fighting a wolf and a tiger with his bare hands. He is on a mission to rescue Mali. And then these two heroes, without realizing they're actually working against each other, end up meeting while they use their incredible abilities to rescue a kid from an exploding bridge.
This is the most
This
badass
all happens before
scene
the
involving
title card appears 40 minutes
the
in.
introduction of
So what
two
I'm saying
heroes.
is, if you enjoyed Drive My Car, this is pretty much the same thing, but with a few more backflips and drop kicks. And later on,
Just that's a more artsy film, and
because most Indian movies
RRR.
have intermissions, or intervals as they're often called, even though the movies don't actually stop here when you're playing in the US, it feels like the biggest, most epic intermission of all time, with a bloody teardrop that practically burns the intermission title card onto the screen.
That interval
Only
scene.
instead of saying interval, it says interval. In American cinema, irony, snark, and self-awareness have become defining characteristics of modern blockbusters. I talked in the last video about how the movie star personas of Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson
Every piece
are
of
largely
melodrama,
built around
every piece of
winking at the
tension
audience
is
as if to
undermined
say,
by
"Isn't it
self-aware
fun?
jokes.
Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. Don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
I'm Deadpool. The leads of RRR might also be huge.
They're
jacks,
always
and
winking
not to be confused with
at the
Hugh Jackman.
camera.
But this movie doesn't wink once. No one is tossing one-liners comparing the villains to characters from 80s movies or making fun of their names.
We have overdone it. Hollywood has overdone it. Bollywood has also overdone it these days.
And this is not to say that the movie is dour and glum.
Whenever
It's
there's
not.
a dramatic scene, there is a self-aware joke to undermine the melodrama or the drama, or
The thing
just to make you feel funny about
RRR
it.
is that it is sincere.
Cheeky
This is a
about it.
movie
Yeah, that's the
fully
word,
on the
sincere.
wavelength of
That's
Dominic Toretto.
that's what
It
RRR
believes in
is.
itself and it isn't afraid of being corny. But instead of being all about family, it's all about the power of friendship. It is super melodramatic. Characters are constantly pledging their lives to missions or saying things like, "I have your friendship," which is more important than my life. And what makes it all work is that the whole story is built on this rock-solid emotional core, where the stakes are always clear. Will Beam rescue Mali? Will Beam and Ram's friendship survive? And of course, the root of all these problems, the true evil looming over everything, is colonialism and the British Empire, represented by the cartoonishly evil governor, played by the Punisher himself, Ray Stevenson, and his sadistic wife, played by Alison Doody, you know, the blonde Nazi woman from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Rajamouli's Bahubali films felt like an updated version of classic Hollywood biblical epics, swords and sandals movies with fantastical elements told as if they were Hindu mythology. And even though RRR is set in the 20th century and involves some real history, he takes a similarly mythic approach to the storytelling. They don't need to give physical explanations for why the good guys have superhuman strength. These are legendary heroes, that's just how it is.
Exactly,
In the
just
third
accept
act
the
of the movie,
universe you're
Ram
in.
even has this makeover, modeling his whole appearance,
Oh,
the
man.
colors of his clothing, and his choice of weapons
Every
on
time
the
I
Hindu god
watch
Ram.
this scene, I have
What
goosebumps.
contributes
I'm not
a
even
lot
that
to the
religious, but
mythological vibe
just
of this movie is this
too good
device
scene.
that RRR uses repeatedly. During a scene, it will play a song with lyrics describing and commenting on the story, essentially functioning like a Greek chorus. During the montage of Beam
That's
and
so
Ram
true.
becoming best friends, a song called Dosti plays, where the lyrics translate to this: an unforeseen turn of fate, which has culminated in this friendship. It's yet to be seen if it will end in bloodshed. A friendship between a volcano and a storm. Once the veil is lifted, will there be a destructive war? This is grand, operatic stuff. And in the climactic action set piece, when the heroes are kicking ass and taking on an entire army by themselves, the soundtrack plays a song where all the lyrics are about how amazing and awesome they are as they take on the roles of specific characters in Hindu mythology. And hey, Taika Waititi, if you're watching this, still got a few months left to
This
add
this
something
video is
like
almost
this
making me
into the new
emotional.
Thor movie.
I don't know
Think
if you
about
can
it.
see that, but
It's a song about
I know
how
this.
cool
The
and
way
charming
he's
Thor is
describing the
while
whole
he's
thing,
beating up
it's.
frost giants. People would love it. Strongest Avenger, his name is Thor.
I'm so
Is
happy
this
I
the
watched
best
this
movie
video.
of the year? Because look, all of their movies this year have a lot to live up to after this. And not just action movies.
It's making me feel
RRR,
really
like many
warm
major
from inside, you know?
blockbusters, is kind of like 3 movies in one. And they all rule. First up, action. The action in RRR is kind of a mix between 90s John Woo and Zack Snyder if he was actually having fun and wasn't being so serious. It's full of slow motion and speed ramping, emphasizing the superheroic poses and impossible strength of the heroes, and it's shot with total clarity. You can see everything, and even though it's assisted with CGI, there's always a weight to it, and it never turns into a bunch of gray sludge like so many American blockbusters. And most of all, the action is inventive and hilarious and shockingly bloody. Like, this mostly PG movie pivots hard into R-rated territory whenever an action scene kicks in, and suddenly the heroes are throwing leopards at bad guys who then get their throats ripped out by said leopards. And the final set piece is the most exhilarating, righteous ass-kicking I've seen since, like, the Knife Museum in John Wick 3. It is already a good year for action, like Ambulance rules. But for now, RRR, best action movie of the year. And it's also the best musical. RRR understands what seemingly no Hollywood movie aside from Spielberg's West Side Story has understood in years. That pretty much nothing in cinema is as exciting as holding on a wide shot while amazing dancers perform spectacular choreography.
Do you know?
What is Natu?
Natu Natu is an absolute banger of a song that I listen to approximately 5 times a day. The scene tells an entire incredibly entertaining story with the heroes facing off against this shitty, villainous British snob who looks like Ben Wishaw's mean older brother and thinks he is the best dancer around. But the important thing about it is that every time the characters dance, the scene cuts to a shot like this. A wide shot where we can see the performers' entire bodies. And it doesn't cut until that part of the dance is done. Months before RRR opened, the studio released a brief 10-second clip of the dancing in the Natu Natu sequence, and it became a viral sensation with so many tutorial videos on YouTube that I lost count. And all just for a 10-second clip of the dance. So when the movie finally opened, and the Natu Natu sequence kicked in, audiences reacted like this.
Oh shit. There are people with their shirts off, confetti.
Like, some people even showed up and performed the dance along with the movie in the theater. Anyway, Song of the Year, give it the Oscar right now. It's the best. And you know what? I'm gonna go further. RRR is also the best romantic comedy of 2022. I'll admit the movie only really spends 20 of its 188 minutes in rom-com mode, but it is such a fun part of the movie. Beam is trying to figure out how to get inside the British mansion where Molly, the little girl, is being held prisoner, and then he encounters Jenny, the governor's niece, and the only nice white person in the entire movie. And he's immediately crushing hard. So then we have a meet cute and these funny scenes where they hang out and try to communicate despite not speaking each other's languages. And you know how romantic comedies always have that inevitable third act misunderstanding that forces the couple to temporarily break up? Well, this has one of those too. Except in RRR, it's because Beam crashes a truck into a party at Jenny's home and lights the place on fire while attacking it with an army of wild animals that kill half the guests. Like I said, best romantic comedy of the year.
Now that he puts it that way, especially the angle about the third act misunderstanding.
Going into RRR, there was obviously a lot of context I was missing, both historically and for the religious imagery used throughout the film. Obviously, though, it still slaps if you know nothing about that stuff. As I mentioned before, I'm not really familiar with Indian cinema, or especially Indian politics, So watching RRR was actually a pretty interesting gateway, especially when I heard some of the criticisms that people have of the movie. Some folks in India have even been calling it propaganda, and while I'm not really qualified to go that far, the reasons for this can offer a window into some wider conversations. I mentioned earlier that Ram's awesome costume change near the end of the movie is meant to resemble the appearance of Lord Ram, a key heroic figure in Hindu scriptures.
Please don't tell me I have
The
read.
specific shade of orange he wears, saffron orange, has deep ties to Hinduism. There are a bunch of references to Hindu mythology that totally went over my head, but they're scattered throughout RRR, and it's what helps the movie feel like this big religious epic. But this is also where some of the criticisms stem from, because that kind of imagery doesn't exist in a vacuum. Now, for this next part, if you want to yell at someone, feel free to yell at my Indian co-writer, because I'm coming at this as an outsider, especially when it comes to issues that deal with caste and tribes. But a movie that takes real people who fought real revolutions for real reasons, like protecting forest lands and tribal communities, and turns them into superheroes in the vein of Hindu gods, it's bound to ruffle a few feathers. For some, it's probably because of the historical inaccuracies.
It's not
but
bound to
a movie
ruffle
like
any
RRR
feathers.
is
People
really
are just
concerned
obsessed
that,
with
so
finding
I'm not sure that matters.
propaganda.
But for others, it's because of the state of Indian politics over the last few years, and its major shift towards right-wing Hindu nationalism that targets Muslims and tribal and lower caste communities.
Oh shit.
That right-wing nationalism is something a lot of big Indian cinema seems to be leaning into as well, especially in Bollywood. The color that represents that right-wing movement is also saffron orange, so you can't really separate the movie from the
See,
wider
even Americans have been
politics
brainwashed
when the
now.
connection is that overt, whether or not it's intentional. I mean, what you see in the movie is still an amazing spectacle because it leads to some of the most innovative,
sad, you know?
fist-pumping,
This is really sad.
violence I've ever seen on screen, and it's all
That
directed
Indians-
towards the British Empire, which is great.
Indians
Three
themselves
words,
have-
grenade-tipped arrows. But I get where people are coming
Indians
from. So if
themselves
nothing
have
else,
turned this
a
movie
like
into
this one is a way to dip your toe into another
an
culture's
object of
cinema,
hate. That's
while
it's a
also
propaganda
learning
film
where
for
exactly
Hindu
it fits
nationalism.
within that culture. This is just one of the many things that makes RRR such a fascinating experience. Even though aspects of RRR feel very modern, like the stylized, CGI-assisted speed-ramping action, the movie itself feels like the kind of Hollywood movie that hasn't existed in decades. It's a big action blockbuster, but it's not based on any intellectual property, and it has no aspirations of becoming a franchise or setting up a spin-off streaming show. It is a historical epic whose major draws are its two stars and its director. If anything, this feels like a throwback to the golden age of Hollywood and movies like Ben-Hur or Gone with the Wind. When the audience is going nuts, whistling and cheering at the screen, it's not because of surprise cameos by characters from other movies. It's because they're so invested in this film. And you know what? I'm just gonna say it. More than any movie I have seen recently, this is the one that lives up to Nicole Kidman's promise in the AMC promo video.
We come to this place for magic. We come to AMC theaters to laugh, to cry, to care. Not just entertained, but somehow reborn. Dazzling images on a huge silver screen. Our heroes feel like the best part of us, and stories feel perfect and powerful.
Because when you're watching RRR, they are RR. So RRR is a pretty great first step into Indian cinema. But what about your next step? And I know this can get overwhelming since Indian cinema is such a massive thing. Like, remember all those different film industries we mentioned earlier that all exist within one country? Well, don't worry, I can help. See, this video is brought to you by Mubi, one of my favorite streaming services. And the whole point of Mubi is to curate a selection of great films from around the world. You can search by huge feature article all about RRR, which is absolutely worth reading. But beyond just Indian films, Mubi has so much great stuff. They permit
Anyways, alright, so this is the complete review slash whatever you might want to call it. about his feelings for RRR, and for the most part, it actually it did make me emotional on more than one occasions. Not because it's an American talking about our movie, but I haven't seen this film uh, being I haven't seen anybody diving into the film the way this guy has done. Uh, he has interpreted scenes. It almost feels like I've watched the film. I've revisited the film. It almost feels like that right now, but from somebody else's eyes, not from my own eyes, but from someone who is a total alien to Indian culture. And this is such a beautiful video. This I I'm so happy I watched this. I had been avoiding watching this video from over a month now because I don't know why. But it's heartening to see that the message that this film is trying to send, or not just it's not like it's an anti-imperialism film and that's a message, but the bigger message that this is what Indian cinema can achieve. We are not see to truth be told, we were never all about musicals. That is one of the genres that exists in all industries in India. But for some reason in the West, they think that all Indian films have just song and dance, and there is no gravity to our films. So that's unfair, but at least there is a film now finally in 2022 that is breaking through, that is shattering that myth, and now these people are more open to exploring Indian cinema in a different way, not just watching those typical films that are made for the NRI audience. And I'm not referring to Karan Johar or Shah Rukh Khan. I'm a Shah Rukh Khan fan, but I'm just saying the American audience for some reason is only exposed to one kind of Hindi Indian films, and this film RRR is changing that and is going to change that forever. At least that's what I hope. Now they should know that apart from the fact that Bollywood is not the only industry, another fact is that musicals are not the only films that we make. Whether it's Bollywood or Tollywood or any other word, every industry makes every kind of film from every genre, and I hope RRR does that for India. The world starts to know, because I've had these discussions with non-Indians, and they say, you know what, I don't watch Indian films. They're all romantic films, hero and heroine dancing on the trees, something of that sort. They say, and I'm like, dude, I don't know why you guys are hung up on just those movies. Indian cinema has always been way bigger than that, right from the beginning. I mean, the movies that I have watched the most, the earliest movies that I have watched are of Raj Kapoor. And Raj Kapoor films were way beyond musicals. Even if they had like 10 songs, 14 songs, they had such deep themes, such amazing messages. They reflected our society of the 50s and of our today's times so beautifully. Not our society, the global society. For example, Awara, for example, फिर सुबह होगी, तीसरी कसम, जागते रहो. Aag. Aag is an underrated masterpiece. I don't know when this thing started to spread that Indian films are all about musicals. So anyways, you can't really change the past. Hopefully RRR gets us more recognition, gets all the other genres in India more recognition, and finally people see us for what we really are as a movie making country.